Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide Jason. I've talked about how strange ecosystems would occur in a fantasy setting, and how many monsters would actually show up. But I haven't talked about how magic could heavily alter the concept of evolution. The first thing we need to talk about is how evolution actually works. And it's mostly pure dumb luck. Throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, and then doing it again and again. It is the slow change of DNA to bring about a physical change, and this is slow and takes time. On average, every time your body copies your entire DNA sequence, there are 2 mistakes, which is stupidly impressive when we are looking at 6 billion base pairs. And to further help, there are plenty of redundancies, where a few different sequences will code for the same amino acid. And then we have the non-transcribed DNA, which is mostly a buffer material. And then we have exons and introns, which are used some of the time. That means it is extremely rare to have a notable mutation in your gene sequence, and thus why evolution is slow. But there are things which speed up the rate of mutation. Things that cause cancer, viruses, prolonged exposure to sunlight, and other such harmful substances. And here's where we are going to have to make a few assumptions about the nature of magic. So let me ask you a question. What is magical energy? Take a moment and think about it really hard. Pause the video, since I know I talk fast. Okay, would you say some form of energy? One which could alter the world? Could you compare it to a form of radiation? Well, last year, I did a video talk about making a mana-based ecosystem. And under such a system, I would say yes. Magical energies could fall under a form of radiation. Though, we could argue that it is more volatile than regular radiation. If I am correct, it might cause evolution to occur at a faster rate, and this might be important. Evolution is random, which means it takes a lot of chances. I mentioned earlier that evolution is luck. It doesn't evolve on purpose. So, when something evolves to fly, it usually goes along the line of jumping and gliding, and then slowly improving the hang time, then elongating the arms to create wings. During all of this, you are getting changes to muscles and lungs. And with all of these, you are also getting bad changes mixed in. Overdeveloped muscles, increased weight, ineffective wing shapes. Those ones quickly get discovered to be bad, and result in death or reduced offspring survival. And now to the first point I've been building towards. Take a few minutes and look at the animals in our world. Fish have a tail and a couple of pectoral fins, and usually a dorsal one on their back. Amphibians start out as a tadpole and happen to look similar to fish, but later grow legs, often their rear ones first. Reptiles have 2 arms and legs, plus a tail and head at the front. What about a mammal? Well, they mostly have the same design, but a couple are bipedal. Except for things like whales, and they happen to be similar to fish. Their bodies shift back from evolution. And what of birds? Well, their front legs are modified into wings. Do you notice something? They basically all have the same body shape, and for the most part, even the same number of bones and muscles. But you might have noticed something. I only covered vertebrates. In fact, I left out the vast majority of all animals. On this category, body shapes gain a massive variation. We got spiders with 8 legs, an abdomen, and a cephalothorax. Then we have scorpions, which also have the 8 legs, in addition to pinchers and a tail. And then we have beetles with 6 legs and wings, but an elytra, which is a tough carapace which covers the wing. And then we got flies, which don't have the wing coverings. And don't forget about millipedes and centipedes, which have much more legs with segmented bodies. And then we got worms. And not all worms are the same. You got flatworms, nematodes, and annelids. And above all that, we got the mollusks, probably the most varied group of animals on the planet, ranging from snails to clams to octopus. But they all share the same portion of their body called a foot, part of the octopus's head, and the bottom of a snail, and so on. Yet, this hasn't always been true, namely the Cambrian explosion. About 540 million years ago, the variety of animals went wild. During this time, we see the most wild variety of animals, and the most animal species in the world. And this might surprise you, but we have had this happen elsewhere throughout history. namely after the KT extinction event, the moment the dinosaurs died out. Every time there is a great cataclysm that destroys a large swath of the Earth's animal and plant populations, we are followed with a massive explosion of evolution. And this brings up the second cause of evolution: open niches to fill. Tactics which no one else is trying. During things like the Cambrian explosion, evolution is exploring increasingly more particular strategies. Now, what does magic do? It is used to cast spells, and each spell is different. From flight spells, gravity spells, size changing spells, fire spells, ice spells, and the list goes on and on. That means it would be highly likely that in a fantasy world, one potential niche to fill is to exploit one spell. Let's take a look at a few different mythical creatures. The Hydra, which has a regeneration spell. There's a dozen from around the world which can turn people to stone, and then we got shapeshifters which can use stealth and deception to hunt. It would seem that we can predict the evolution of various mythical creatures by looking at which niches they use and which spells they exploit to fill it. And with a variety of spells, we now have a lot more niches to explore, thus we have more different animals. This is why we have griffins and dragons. But I mentioned filling niches, so wouldn't a griffin and dragon fill the same niche? No, this is the same issue with falcons and eagles. Both are aerial predators, but they use slightly different hunting methods. Falcons tend to be faster, while eagles usually are bigger with more power. So we could assume that the griffin might hunt more like a falcon when compared to a dragon as an eagle. So for a mythical creature to evolve, it needs to find a niche to exploit. And I'm betting that more races and species will appear after some sort of disaster, and those are common in a fantasy setting. And now I can get to another point that I've been building towards. Sorry it has taken this long to get to it. Do you remember how I rambled off all the various shapes of animals? Here's the ultimate point. Animals are generally very consistent along their evolutionary lines. But in a fantasy world, we have those which deviate from the basic body plan. We have griffins and sphinxes with 6 limbs, but are they closely related to lions? They have a similar body shape, but lack the extra limb. So what would cause the evolution of the wings? What makes more sense? Multiple species evolving extra sets of limbs independent of each other, or 2 competing evolutionary lines, one 4-limbed and the other 6-limbed? Well, there is a real-world example of that, and it is in mammals, in particular the placental mammals and the marsupials, so it wouldn't be completely impossible to get these 2 competing lines. But here's the catch. There's dozens of mechanisms behind each facet of an animal. Muscle and bone design, nerve setup, and so on. It's a long list. Having 2 competing evolutionary groups coexist is unlikely, and it is something we see with the marsupials being almost completely exclusive to Australia, and placental mammals dominating the rest of the world. So which sounds more likely? 2 competing evolutionary lines, which are both succeeding, or randomly evolving additional limbs on multiple animals. And we actually have a way to figure this out. The first would be a DNA analysis of the animals, and the second is an embryological development. But since we don't have either of those from a fantasy world, we are left with speculation. Lastly, I want to talk about something common in a fantasy world, and that is the myriad of different intelligent species. We got merfolk, elves, lizardmen, minotaurs, dwarves, centaurs, human, and hobbits, and that is even scratching the surface. So, what would cause all of these races to emerge, and a couple of species like apes, birds, and dolphins, which have a little bit of intelligence, but not civilization builders? And we need to look at how humans evolved in theory. We are believed to have come from apes and monkeys and lived in trees. To manage such an environment, your brain needs to be able to manage a 3-dimensional layout. This encourages the size of the brain. And this may be why we see higher levels of intelligence in burrows and dolphins, who have a similar situation to manage. Yet, the environment was changing, and the trees were being replaced by fields. They were left with their more developed brains, and not needing to use it, thus the use of the brain changed. Yet, you might have noticed something. I didn't mention bats here. Bats are not known for their incredible intelligence, but also manage a 3-dimensional environment. Oh, their brains are developed to use echolocation, they aren't stupid. And well, the brain is very energy demanding, but there are other organ systems which are also energy demanding. One of those is the testicles. Bats are not monogamous, and they tend to sleep around. This results in more competition with mating and securing offspring. So, there is an evolutionary choice to be made. promote intelligence or more sperm release with mating. Yeah, bats were thinking with their little heads, so to speak. But humans are believed to have operated in a different situation, and that is a harem setup, similar to how a lion pride works. Here, you would only get a couple of males per early tribe, with the older generation being killed or run off. And this might be a factor which can be used to predict the rise of other intelligent races. The various races would likely need a situation which would promote a larger brain, and in particular a more developed frontal cortex. Now, tree climbing isn't the only way. In fact, if we increase the danger of the world, that could spur forth a situation that prefers intelligence. Of course, we still need to deal with species which rely on outbreeding and overpopulation to survive in a dangerous environment. Yet, what are the chances that multiple races would all evolve the same level of intelligence? This is the same thing I argued earlier with the evolution of extra limbs. Isn't that a niche which might be overly crowded? And potentially yes. Higher intelligence has a higher energy cost, which could limit some environments and the population, such as centaurs being plains animals. And I have an answer on this one. Remember, I spoke about dragons. That can easily be a deciding factor. It was a massive flying apex predator. That means even races which don't operate in 3 dimensions will need to think that way to deal with an increase in aerial predators. But I do have another option. I mentioned it early on that viruses could cause mutations. Potentially, a virus could spread the genes for intelligence from one race to another. Thus, we can actually cheat intelligence to others. We could use this as well for the extra limbs. This is actually a method used in gene therapy, so it does exist in our world, just not even close to this level. But this is a magical world, so we can fudge things a little. And that is, even if we don't mix gods helping them out. Yes, it would seem that by introducing magic to the ecosystem, it would likely create an extra force, spurring forth evolution, and mythical creatures seeking unexplored niches and tactics which haven't been looked at yet. Though the evolution of additional sentient races is a bit more difficult to be sure, but it could still happen. What do you think? Does my thought process even make sense? Well, probably not. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.